Hello, my dear friends. You're in the Military Summary channel, and today we will discuss the situation in the world on the 22nd of July of 2026. Today we have lots of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first, we're going to talk about the conflict on the territory of Ukraine. First, we're going to discuss probably one of the most important updates. According to information we have, the Foreign Minister of Russia, Sergei Lavrov, tomorrow is going to have a meeting with the Secretary of State of the United States of America, Marco Rubio, and they're going to talk about probably missiles. So we and Russia are the two largest nuclear-armed countries on the planet. For us not to talk would be reckless and irresponsible. We have to have a relationship with the Russian government. So basically, they were talking about long-range and mid-range strikes. During the previous days, for example, the Russians made lots of statements on the mat that the United States of America is the side that allows, helps, and controls the Ukrainian long-range and mid-range strikes. When talking about attacks carried out by the Ukrainians, for example, in the area of the city of Krasnodar, as of the previous 24 hours, if you remember, the Ukrainians attacked some warehouse and this warehouse was destroyed. So the Russians are trying to tell us that all these attacks that were carried out by the Ukrainians on oil refineries, on different warehouses, were carried out by the Ukrainians with the help of the United States of America, more precisely with the help of the US intelligence. So they're planning to talk, but what are they going to talk about? And you know that these days we start receiving lots of updates from the Middle East when journalists, now we're asking both the President of the United States of America and the Secretary of State Rubio on the matter whether the Russians or the Chinese help Iran to target the US military bases. So this is probably going to be a topic of conversation between Russia and the United States of America tomorrow, and maybe if they have anything to talk about, there may be an agreement between Russia and the United States of America that neither the Russians nor the Americans will provide assistance neither to Ukraine or Iran to attack military objects, any objects on the territory of each other. If either the Iranians or the Ukrainians attack bases of the United States of America or deep inside of the territory of Russia, they must do this using their own means. So probably this is going to be a topic for conversation, and very difficult to say whether the parties are able to reach an agreement, but the fact that they are going to have a meeting tells us that something might happen. Anyway, let's return back to Ukraine and let's discuss the situation on the ground. During the previous 24 hours, lots of changes on the ground were recorded. And first we're going to talk about the Zaporizhzhia direction, where the Russians continue their offensive operation towards the city of Orekhov, towards the settlements of Yurkovka, Tavriiske, and the city of Zaporizhzhia itself. And during the previous 24 hours, the Russians managed to improve their position significantly through the eastern Zaporizhzhia front, and the Russians, as a result of clashes, established complete control over the settlement of Blahodatne. And these are the changes on the ground between the dates. This is the end of the 23rd of July of 2026, and this is the end of the 22nd of July of 2026. The Russians took under complete control the settlement, and the Russians published this video where we can see how exactly the clashes for the settlement of Blahodatne were taking place. Here we can see lots of episodes how the Russians were attacking the territory of the settlement, and during the final part of this video we can see at least a Russian soldier with the Russian flag. So this Russian soldier was recorded and was geolocated right exactly at this point, and based on this video we made these adjustments. So the Russians continue offensive operation. If you remember, since the beginning of June of 2026, the Russians improved their position significantly in this area. First, the Russians captured the settlement of Alexandrovka. Then the Russians improved their positions in the area of the settlement of Dobropillya. Then the Russians took under complete control the villages of Novoskeletovato and Bogodarivka. Later, the Russians crossed the river by the name of Gaichul, improved their positions further in the western direction, and took under complete control the settlement of Volna. And now we have a report that the Russians also improved their positions in the area of Blahodatovka. So these are the changes and these are the improvements of Russians, and we see, according to this configuration, the front line, the Ukrainians along the river of Gaichul most likely were caught by the Russians in Cauldron. So we are talking about these territories. You can see there is something like a pocket. There are two types of territories inside of these pockets. pocket. Some territories are marked as a gray zone because during February, March, and April and May of 2026, pro-Ukrainian sources claim that the Ukrainians counterattacked in this direction and managed to recapture lots of video through this area. But as of the end of the 22nd of July of 2026, we still haven't received anything that can confirm that the Ukrainians indeed managed to recapture all these villages. So that is why we continue keeping these territories as a gray zone. But at the same time, we have reports that several villages were recaptured, like the village of Andreevka and partially the village of Bratskaya. Anyway, the most important thing that's now this pocket has been encircled by Russians, as you can see, and most likely in coming days, in coming hours, the Russians would be tasked and focused with the purpose to eliminate this pocket and then to continue moving further in the western direction. So this is a very important situation with this pocket because we see that the Russians are trying to create a very strong positions through the northeastern Zaporizhzhia direction. And the most important thing is that the Russians are trying to improve the entire front line through the eastern parts of the city of the Zaporizhzhia direction. And currently the length of the front line through the eastern Zaporizhzhia direction is already more than or around 60 kilometers. And using this broad front line attack, the Russians most likely are planning to move further, to continue advancing further in the western direction with the purpose to attack at least three territories: the city of Orekhov and its agglomeration, the villages and cities of Tavriiske and Yurkovka, and the city of Zaporizhzhia itself. The Russians continue improving their eastern Zaporizhzhia flank with the purpose then to continue advancing further in the western direction. Meanwhile, the Russians continue bombing and attacking the city of Zaporizhzhia during the previous 12 hours. Additional explosions were recorded through this area, and in this video we can see a drone attacking this facility. A very heavy explosion was recorded. The Russians attacked this building, and as you can see, there are lots of trucks, vehicles in this area, both to the west and to the east of this facility. As you can see, most likely this is something like an auto part service center or facility, and the Russians during the previous 24 hours attacked this territory. Most likely the Ukrainians were using these territories to upgrade trucks with the purpose to attack deep inside of the territory of Russia. Another important facility through the eastern parts of the city of Zaporizhzhia was attacked by Russians, and we are talking about this facility. As you can see, there is a warehouse, and this warehouse was destroyed by Russians, and as you can see, there are also trucks on this parking site, and even from this angle of the satellite picture, we can see trucks, we can see barracks, we can see logistic hub of the armed forces of Ukraine. So this is the situation through the entire Zaporizhzhia direction, but you know that despite the fact that the Russians continue attacking all these, let's say, warehouses, gas stations, and many other different things, we see that the Ukrainians continue improving their positions with the purpose to become completely independent from these trucks from the east, even from the eastern parts of the river of Dnipro. Now we know that the Ukrainians, if they want to attack deep inside of the territory of Russia, they need to bring their vehicles as close as possible to the line of combat contact. Let's say the Ukrainians need to deploy their vehicles somewhere here with the purpose if they want to attack deep inside of the territory of Russia. And we see that despite the fact that the Ukrainians since the beginning of this year have carried out dozens or hundreds of attacks, and these attacks brought significant results to the Ukrainian side, we see that every day it's becoming more and more difficult for the Ukrainians to launch drones because the Russians destroy warehouses, ammo depots, and so on. So that is why the Ukrainians began developing another technology in advance, and the Ukrainians decided to become completely independent from trucks and launching sites. And this is the sources reported that the Ukrainians began using something new. The Ukrainians began using balloons. They began using balloons to deliver Ukrainian drones over long distances. So if you use balloons, then this means that you can use let's say the western parts of Ukraine as a launching side. You can use balloons. These balloons will fly in the eastern direction. Then somewhere from this area, these balloons can drop drones, and then from these positions, the Ukrainian drones can continue advancing and attacking further in the eastern direction. So, and if it happens, of course, this will probably make more problems to Russians. But let's wait and see how the things are going to develop. Now let's return. Let's discuss the situation in the Dobropillya direction, because during the previous 24 hours, lots of changes on the ground were recorded. As you can see, the map has been adjusted in the area of the city of Dobropillya. This is the end of the 21st of July of 2026, and this is the end of the 22nd of July. The Russians, according to different pro-Russian sources, during the previous 24 hours improved their position significantly, especially through the eastern parts of the city of Dobropillya. The Russians captured completely the eastern parts of the settlement, the mine, the Terikon, the strategical elevation. Furthermore, the Russians captured the settlement of Ganovka, and the most important, the Russians have cut the TO-514 road. So as you can see, the Russians control lots of territories through the eastern parts of the city of Dobropillya, but as of the end of the 22nd of July of 2026, we still haven't received anything that can confirm this. We are talking about, first of all, both or either videos or reports of the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation. But anyway, these posts were published by very reliable pro-Russian sources, and if this situation is correct, then we can start saying that the days of the city of Dobropillya are numbered, and it seems that by the end of August of 2026, the Russians will finish the battle for this territory. And if it happens, then it will be very difficult to predict how exactly the things are going to develop next, because from the city of Dobropillya, the Russians can begin advancing further in the northwestern direction, even in the direction of the cities like Pavlograd. The Russians from these positions can advance in the direction of the city of Lazova, and even from these positions, the Russians can begin offensive operation in the direction of the city of Kharkiv from the south. So let's wait and see. Most likely, if the situation is correct, the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation in coming days may confirm Russian control at least over the city of Ganovka. Now let's move further and let's talk about the Druzhkivka direction. During the previous 24 hours, the Russians improved their positions both through the western and the eastern flanks of the Druzhkivka direction. The Russians finished the battle for the villages of Priut, Pavlovka, Novopavlovka, and approached the settlement of Torske and basically answered the settlement from the south and established control for more than 10% of the settlement. And the Russians improved their positions to the north of the settlement of Kostiantynivka, and first buildings were captured on the territory of the city of Druzhkivka. We are talking about the Tukhachevskaya Street. So this territory was captured, and these are the changes on the ground that were provided by different sources. Yesterday we received the report that Russians improved their positions around Zhizhovka. Today we received the report that Russians improved their positions through the southeastern parts of Alexeyevka Druzhkivka. So as you can see, the situation is quite complicated for the armed forces of Ukraine, because still pro-Ukrainian sources show the city of Kostiantynivka under complete Ukrainian control, and the first pro-Russian sources began reporting that the Russians began offensive operation or began advancing through the settlement of Alexeyevka Druzhkivka, and that the battle has already begun. The situation quite complicated, but if Russians show a flag through the settlement of Alexeyevka Druzhkivka, then this situation can lead to unpredictable consequences to the position of the armed forces of Ukraine, official Ukrainian authorities regarding the city of Kostiantynivka. Now let's move further. Let's talk about the eastern Slovyansk direction. During the previous 24 hours, the Russians improved their positions in this area as well. And yesterday, more precisely on the 17th of July of 2026, pro-Russian sources reported that the battle for this big forest to the north of the settlement of Alexandrovka has ended. So the Russians captured the forest, and basically the Russians captured every single square kilometer around the settlement of Mykolaivka, which means that everything is ready before the beginning of this offensive operation. Since the beginning of the special military operation, we had 2, 3, or 4 similar operations. For example, something similar took place during the battle for the city of Chasiv Yar. If you remember, there was the Canal micro-district, which was located on the Russian side of the Seversky Donetsk-Donbass Canal, and the clashes for this micro-district took a very long period of time. We had some something similar with, for example, the city of Ugledar. So when the Russians approached another citadel, and it took time before the Russians were able to cross the citadel itself. So another battle for another Ugledar has started, or something similar, and let's wait and see how the things are going to develop. Another important thing, that probably this is the most complicated battle, because as for the Canal micro-district and Ugledar, the Russians were able to encircle or semi-encircle those citadels, but as of this territory we have water barriers around and behind the settlement of Mykolaivka, which reduce the territories and space for maneuvering for Russian forces, which means that it's going to be very difficult before the Russians are able to dig in deeper and to take under complete control first buildings. And furthermore, when talking about the citadel, first the Russians would be forced to take under complete control the residential area, and only then the Russians would be able to approach the citadel itself. As for the south and Kupiansk direction, we haven't received anything from this area, neither from the area of the city of Liman or from the Barova direction. But once again, as we discussed many times before, currently there are very heavy clashes for this area, and one of the most important battles are taking place right exactly here. Now let's talk about the northern directions. During the previous 24 hours, we received lots of updates from the most northeastern parts of the Kharkiv region. The Russians captured the settlement of Artilne, and these are the changes on the ground between the days. The Russians continue advancing along the border, and the Russians right now began offensive operation with the purpose to cut the most northeastern parts of the Kharkiv region completely. The Russians continue clashes for the settlement of Bilyi Kolodiaz, and as we discussed during the previous videos, if Ukrainians lose control over the settlement of Bilyi Kolodiaz, these northeastern parts of the Kharkiv region could collapse automatically. And if it happens, then the front line would shift further in the southern direction towards the settlement of Velykyi Burluk, which is the next stronghold through the northeastern parts of the Kharkiv area. But the settlement of Velykyi Burluk is located not along the Pechenegi water reservoir, which means that the Russians have a space to continue advancing further along the reservoir and south flank, basically the settlement of Velykyi Burluk. So from this configuration, the front line, it seems that the Russians will spend less time for the battle for Velykyi Burluk than they have spent for the cities of Volchansk and Bilyi Kolodiaz itself. Furthermore, the Russians managed to recapture the settlement of Gravska along the river Seversky Donets, and the Russians continue advancing. As for the Sumy direction and the most northern parts of the city of the Sumy direction, during the previous 24 hours, we haven't received anything special. During the previous day, the Russians continue attacking the territory using drones, missiles, banderol missiles, and so on. The Minister of Defense of Ukraine reported that the Russians used 220 air means to attack the territory of Ukraine, and most of these air means were used by Russians through the Odesa region. The Russians were attacking different vessels. Here we have a video of this. The Russians were attacking vessels also right offshore the city of Odesa. Here we have more updates on this matter, and of course the Russians were attacking objects of infrastructure on the territory of the city itself. So lots of explosions were recorded, and several experts made an analysis on this matter, saying that the city of Odesa has been attacked by the Russians since the beginning of this year significantly, and this is the second place when talking about the number of missiles and drones that the Russians used to attack this or that territory of Ukraine. The first place, of course, is the city of Kiev, and the second place is the city of Odesa. The Ukrainians also attacked deep inside of the territory of Russia, and the Ukrainians were attacking the most southern regions of Ukraine, of the Russian Federation, and the Ukrainians were attacking warehouses, and as a result of attack, a warehouse on the territory of the city of Krasnodar was destroyed. We're talking about this one, and a warehouse on the settlement of Nevinnomyssk was attacked also by the Ukrainian side, and these constructions were destroyed or badly damaged. And during the day we received lots of videos. Here we can see a very big fire, huge fire, and here we have a black smoke over this object of logistics infrastructure. And one thing is clear, that most likely after these attacks, these facilities most likely were reduced to ruins. And according to these attacks and due to these attacks, this evening we start receiving reports that most likely in coming hours, maybe between the 22nd and the 23rd of July of 2026, the Russians will carry out another massive attack through the entire territory of Ukraine, and most likely the Russians would attack something similar: warehouses, ammo depots, logistics, of course, as usually, and probably many other different objects and targets on the territory of Ukraine. And that's it for today. The Military Summary channel reminds us to condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for your watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.